her speech. The government the United States has bestowed on us has been parental in every respect, and it behooves us to show our appreciation by giving consistent and loyal support to those in authority. By doing so, we can win their favor and secure more than by creating a feeling of antagonism. Johnston was referring to the growing tensions between the Navy and the Chamorros, especially around the Chamorro movement for U.S. citizenship. Chamorros first petitioned for citizenship in 1902, but the height of the movement before the war came in 1936. Then, Guam Congress representatives Baltasar Bordallo and Francisco Leon Guerrero traveled to D.C. and petitioned Congress to grant U.S. citizenship to the Chamorros. For Johnston, Chamorros could achieve progress and be granted more privileges if they cooperated with the Navy. She also couched the relation in terms of obedience of a child to its parent, and so appears to have accepted the patronizing and chauvinistic views of the paternal naval government. She appears to have accepted her lot as that of a child, which is to say that she acquiesced to the racialized and gendered discourse that in fact infantilized the Chamorros as helpless children in need of parental supervision and guidance. If the governor was her father, the patriarch, America was her mother. This loyalty and patriotism is writ across her platform for education, which reads as if she were in fact thoroughly schooled by white male colonial administrators and their accomplices of educational authority. U.S. Marines and spouses of U.S. naval officers and their dependents, who doubled as teachers under the category special contract laborer. Johnston, the teacher, pupil, or colonized headmaster. Naturally, having spent the greater part of my life as a school teacher, I am a firm believer in education. No people can progress far without education. I do not mean education of an impractical nature, but education that will best fit the child for the work of life later on. Education that will make him a better citizen and that will make him an economic asset to his community. A program for the practical education of the youth of Guam within the bounds of money available has been my platform and always will be, whether I am a member of Congress or not. To help explain the hold of colonialist miseducation on Johnston's consciousness, we might even consider Johnston's marriage to her teacher, William Johnston, and what it enabled for his wife's wide-ranging and successful career. We might even recall Agata Johnston's deep admiration and gratitude to William's boss, Governor Dorn, who was Agata's first and best and most pleasing of all the governors whose benevolent plan for the island she wholeheartedly accepted. Dorn was, after all, their patriarch, the one who, were he a teacher, she would be his best pupil. As critical scholarship on colonial education and colonialism in general has demonstrated, however, a lesson planned and taught does not guarantee that the student, particularly native students, will simply learn it, much less apply it towards the same effects and outcomes that might have been intended by the teacher. The Navy did, after all, commission the anthropologist Laura Thompson to investigate why its educational mission did not appear to be working in Guam. As a teacher myself, I can actually attest to the fact that what you try to teach doesn't necessarily take place, right? So there is no law in nature or public service or in colonial administration, in other words, that can ensure that Johnston's faith in practical education, as well as her aspiration for progress for Guam, are absolutely identical with those of the naval order. Furthermore, it would be nothing less than acceding to American colonialism if we were to presume that America, or the West, possessed exclusive ownership over the ideas of education, progress, or practicality, or modernity. In fact, I would argue that Johnston's assertions of what kind of education was best for Guam were nested within a larger belief in America and is best captured in the hybridized Spanish Catholic Chamorro historical figure of the Madlina, or Chamorro godmother. She is, after all, Guam's quote-unquote godmother of education. Even though the name was given to her by Chamorros after the war to honor her half-century of service to Guam's education, the figure of the Madlina also captures the way Johnston was able to act as cultural broker, public servant, religious, spiritual, and secular leader. She would especially assert this during the war and after. This progressive chronology gives us a historiographical framework to reread her pre-war past, as I have done, but also of her wartime experience with Tweed, since he was the one who doubted her loyalty to America and the integrity or authenticity of her self-defined American patriotism. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to cover that part of the story, except to assert that whether in Tweed's own account of his absence or in other oral accounts that have circulated in Guam's history of its constancy, the story of Agueda Johnston's loyalty and patriotism to America also consistently features her role as a woman and a mother who is taking care of business that needs to be taken care of. For example, the incident during the occupation that triggered Johnston to again risk her life and find Tweed and plead with him to surrender involved the brutal beating of B.J. Berdayu, who Johnston said was, quote, a good family man. The key words here are good and family man, and the key agent is Johnston, the Chamorro woman. This triggering event reveals, I would argue, vestiges of Chamorro womanhood, the traditional role of Chamorro women, whose responsibility, according to Chamorro feminist Laura Souter, was to safeguard the Chamorro family, even or perhaps especially when it was under assault or placed in danger at the hands of the Japanese. As we know, in Chamorro society, deep traditional values are, we might say, homeschooled in a key cultural code called Inafat which denotes making something good or right and connotes balance. Woven into the Inafat code are other values considered deep or tadung, and with its own connotations of substance and wisdom. Tadung practices include gai mamala, literally to have shame, but loosely to save face. The manini, the sniffing of an elder's hand to take in his or her essence as a sign of respect. The chinsuli, a form of payment to somebody in need as a form of creating and maintaining a form of an unequal indebtedness so that one always has purchase over others precisely because they are never able to repay and thus equalize the relationship. After centuries of Spanish colonization, but far from simple Hispanicization, these Tadung values and practices have also necessarily become contained in Spanish Catholic rituals such as fiestas or religious feasts, novena or 9-day prayer vigils, the Lisadzu or rosaries, and most pertinent here, the compare system, in Spanish compadre, or in English godparenthood system. Among the Chamorros, the Patlino or the Padrino or godfather refers to the male and the Matlina, the female, the godmother. Like how God is figured as the ultimate authority and the king his surrogate on earth, as was the Pope in Rome, so too was the logic replicated, as Vince Raphael teaches us, in the chain of command in the Spanish Empire. In the Spanish Empire, the king had surrogates who themselves had surrogates, who also had surrogates extending across empire. Following the spiritual and temporal model, the godparenthood system also featured the archetypical model of patronage and homage, of a figure of authority looking after the needs and welfare of its subordinates in return for tribute and respect and loyalty. But in Chamorro culture, the top woman of any clan is supposed to wield ultimate authority over clan matters. The Matlina is arguably the most powerful or most potent of this woman-oriented hierarchy. The title godmother of Guam's education is underscored by values and practices that are tadung, that are deep. This designation was as deep and significant as Agatha Johnson's devotion to Chamorro Catholicism, from which she never strayed across her wide-ranging